Hello and welcome to the Infinite Ascension Dev Diaries. This video is going to cover the new warp system. For my original in-game video, that was one of the more commented on aspects of it, and so it's definitely something I want to address in my subsequent videos. First, I'm going to go over the old system so you can see the changes that have been made since then. It essentially was a satisfactory experience, however, it really had a couple issues that I wanted to address. The first was this sort of charging particle effect. When you hit your jump button before you were actually entering hyperspace, it looked okay, but barely, and it really didn't work when the ship was moving because it was working on the global. The second thing I wanted to do was the hyperspace effect. It was sort of standard and not particularly great. It worked, but again, it wasn't particularly eye candy-ish. And the third thing was the exiting of the hyperspace, and that you exited right at the origin. There wasn't a smooth exit. It was just drops you in there. So those are the main points that I wanted to address with the new system. So here's the new system, and I'm going to jump right into a demonstration of it. One thing to note is the skyboxes for each of these systems are going to be distinct in order to provide more variation in these systems. And so we're going to jet off a little bit off the planet here, and then let's hit the button and warp. You'll see the first thing that's gone is the charging animation. I removed it. It didn't work. It never seemed to work. None of the art assets that I have made it work, so it's gone. So here we go. And there's a lens flare at the beginning and end of the hyperspace in order to allow you to transition to each of the systems in a more fluid manner. Now that you've seen the warp effect, I'm going to go over the individual pieces of it so that you can understand my implementation. The first of which is the charge or pre-hyperspace portion of the effect. Basically, I removed the static charge animation, which was just a glowing particle effect at the back of the spaceship. I replaced it with a simple kinetic particle effect in order to give the ship a sense of movement. I also made it a lot shorter, so there's not as much time waiting for you to enter hyperspace. It's more of an instantaneous process. You hit it, you wait for a second or two, and you're out. The other change I made during the pre-warp process is I enabled the default ship thruster. This gave it a better look and made it feel more cohesive, as this was the ship warping rather than just some warp effect on top of the game itself. One of the other changes I made was to the transition as you jump out of the system. Previously it was smooth, however it was done on the client side. The new effect is now done on the server side so that all other ships in the system will see you warp out rather than just have you disappear, which would the previous behavior would have resulted in. Now we get to the hyperspace effect itself. The first thing you'll notice is a lens flare immediately after you enter hyperspace. The purpose of this is to allow me to fade between two different skyboxes without having the player notice it, or at least not make it very obvious to the player that it's happening. Again, sort of keep them in the game rather than saying, oh, that's a nice effect on top of the game. The second thing you'll see is there's a new hyperspace particle effect in the background. I felt this was better if we're going to be doing this sort of white flash, we should have a really like a hyperspace tunnel. This is sort of my version of that at the moment, and that might change in the future. And then we also have a hyperspace, or a lens flare on the way out, again to allow me to transition from one skybox to another smoothly. And finally we have the end of the warp effect. Like the beginning, it's a smooth entry into the system, and it's done server side, so all other players will see that happen. It's also now a random location currently around the origin. However, the current system allows me to move it around, so I could have players from certain systems drop into maybe the upper left corner or the lower right corner, and people could use this as a way to possibly create better environments for which players might have to fight through. Like maybe you couldn't warp into the center of the system, you have to warp at the edge and then fight through to a certain goal. Again, this is just giving me more flexibility, makes a better visual effect, and I think it improves the game overall.